When the clock struck 12 on January 1st, 1999, no one knew what would become of the very last year of the 20th century. In every aspect of history and culture, from what we wore, what we listened to, and what we watched, would be forever changed by the year 1999. We were on the precipice of television reinventing itself, 50 years after it was first introduced. There was an incredibly varied musical scene that was simultaneously timeless and very much of the time. Movie theaters were filled to the brim with exciting, weird, original stories being told by what was considered to be the new wave of great American filmmakers. But with excitement can come fear. The year also brought a new sense of reality with the gut punch of tragedy, a tragedy that shaped the emotional texture of the country forever. And with just a pinch of Y2K-induced panic for good measure, 1999 was truly the embodiment of this global celebration for the end of the millennium, as well as the societal anxiety of what was to come. Hi, I'm Bobby, this is Culture Kitsch, and it's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine because today we're taking a look back at the culture-shifting year that was 1999. Towards the close of the 20th century, one of its greatest offerings, television, had gone from a newfangled technology that only 9% of American households had in 1950 to something that 98.2% of Americans couldn't live without by the late 90s. For television, the 90s had served as the culmination of all that the medium was, expanding in both genre and format. Networks like Fox presented a cutting-edge and fresh take on TV with shows like Martin, Living Single, and In Living Color, while the big three networks ABC, NBC, and CBS continued to expand their rosters, producing heavy hitters like ABC's TGIF lineup that gave us teen fare like Boy Meets World and Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and NBC with the must-see TV lineup that included Seinfeld, Frasier, and Living Single's parasitic porcelain-shaded twin, Friends. Children's television was experiencing a big boom, with the titan of kids' entertainment Nickelodeon completely upending what television had understood entertainment for younger audiences to be by going all in on the medium of animation, providing a place for young artists to create their own shows, which gave the world such shows as Rugrats and Hey Arnold. WB was producing Animani and totally insane shows like Animaniacs, while simultaneously building the playbook for what good storytelling for superheroes looked like, with X-Men the Animated Series and Batman the Animated Series. Adult animation was experiencing a renaissance too, with The Simpsons cementing itself as the adult animated show of all time, while MTV was churning out the programming of many a college dorm room and rec room with Daria, Aeon Flux, and Beavis and Butthead. I could go on, but in a word, the 90s represented a major maturation period for television that signaled that things were getting realer, edgier, sexier, and more complex. If 1990 to 1998 was the warm-up, 1999 was the sprint into the new millennium, and the tide of TV changed as soon as 11 days into the new year. The 1999 class of television saw the introduction of pillars of the medium, like Law & Order SVU, The West Wing, Family Guy, Futurama, Spongebob Squarepants, and The Sopranos. The Sopranos is rightly crowned with being the show that dramatically changed what TV could be. The characters were messy and beautifully complex while remaining eternally entertaining. And this creative freedom was due in large part to where the show lived, which was HBO. By the late 90s, HBO had already started to quietly innovate television with hits like the prison drama Oz and the most fashionable show in television history with Sex and the City. While The Sopranos deserves its place as one of the greatest TV shows of all time, the things that made it great were indicative of a tide that was already very slowly beginning to change in television, a slow crawl towards the era that we would call prestige TV. One thing that's remarkable about The Sopranos and other similar shows released in 1999 is that they still felt like TV. What I mean by that is that right now there is an increasing ideology that TV being TV is not enough. TV must feel like movies to feel innovative. The great thing about these shows at the turn of the century was that they found a way to create depth and complexity to television while still holding up the core tenets of the medium. TV was TV, and TV is good. 1999 also gave us a glimpse into the future of Hollywood across multiple shows, with some shows being filled to the brim with young talent, just like NBC's Freaks and Geeks. Freaks and Geeks was a teen dramedy that starred Linda Cardellini, Seth Rogen, Busy Phillips, Jason Segel, Martin Starr, Sam Levine, James Franco, and John Francis Daley. The show was an example of how teen media around this time was well and truly at its peak. It was an honest, less glamorous look at adolescence and Hollywood. There were freaks and geeks, but not in the John Hughesian way, but in a much more real way. Creator Paul Feig told the New York Times, quote, "It came from the years of frustration of watching teen movies and shows, and it was all beautiful kids, and everyone's hot, and they're all having sex, and all of their problems are about sex. This has nothing to do with anything I experienced in high school. We weren't that cool. We were a bunch of nerds." The show only ran 18 episodes, but it made an indelible mark on teen media. Freaks and Geeks was gone too soon, but it wasn't the only show airing for teens at the time. The theme you'll see in this video is that it was a very interesting time to be a teenager because there was so much media tailor-made for that specific group. We had shows like The Parkers, which was a spin-off of the immensely popular Moesha, starring Monique and Countess Vaughn, who carried the legacy of the 90s boom in black sitcoms well into the new millennium. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Charmed, Dawson's Creek, in fact, most of the things on the WB and UPN were considered to be the hub for teens. RIP the WB and UPN. Your child, the CW, is doing her best in your stead. Professional wrestling was continuing to ride the wave of popularity that the late 90s afforded it with the premiere of then WWF SmackDown, which became the show for some of wrestling's youngest, most innovative talent. In a sense, things just felt young, things felt fresh. Television was going into its 50th year and the new century with innovation that excites on its mind. Among cinephiles, it is hotly contested on what is the best movie year ever. Gladiators and representation of the houses of such years as 2007 and 2019 have done battle, but it is 1999 that stands above them all. A roster of films that include The Matrix, Fight Club, The Blair Witch Project, Being John Malkovich, The Sixth Sense, and my personal favorite of the year, Election. Many film scholars have circled their academic interest around what the year 1999 meant to film and why it was such a, for lack of a better term, freak of nature year for the movies. And that speculation began as soon as November 26th of 1999. Jeff Gordinier, for a November 1999 Entertainment Weekly article, hailed 1999 as the year that changed movies, saying, "You can stop waiting for the future of movies, it's already here. Someday 1999 will be etched on a microchip as the first real year of 21st century filmmaking. The year when all the old boring rules about cinema started to crumble. The year when a new generation of directors weaned on cyberspace and cops, Pac-Man, and Public Enemy snatched the flickering torch from the aging rebels of the 1970s. The year when the concept of making a movie got turned on its head." Run the Run director Tom Tykwer states, "Everyone knows that we're hitting the limits of traditional filmmaking because it's becoming so perfectionistic. This is the foundation for which many critics laid their arguments in favor for the films of 1999 that came from what Patrick Goldstein called the new wave. The question of what do you create at the end of history was essentially the thesis statement of these new wave of directors that included Sofia Coppola, M. Night Shyamalan, Paul Thomas Anderson, and the Wachowskis, and how they would approach their films. It was very whose line is it anyway? The rules are made up and the points don't matter." There were a few factors that contributed to this, lack of a better term, balls to the wall energy that the up and coming 1999 class of filmmakers had, one of which being the uptick in DVDs. As explained in a 2019 article from The Independent, the economics of DVDs were great for studios and meant that even if a movie couldn't do great at the theater, it could still make money after the fact. Fight Club, for example, was a huge disappointment on release, grossing $37 million against a production budget of $63 million at the box office, but became a huge sleeper hit on home video. Home exhibition via VHS had become relatively common at this point, but VHS was bulky and a bit of a clunky technology. The DVD felt like the future. Slick, thin chrome discs that could hold more data were going to take movies into the new millennium. Plus, they could hit the market for cheaper and much quicker than a VHS tape, which opened the door for more movies that perhaps you might not have caught in the theater, to be available at home. Another reason is the presence of more studios and the lack of media conglomeration. So the opportunity to take on more films was kind of at an all-time high. It didn't feel like there was a particular need for one type of film. The demand was for good movies, and the supply was met across genre, form, scale, and medium. It was a dramatically varied scene that allowed for a studio rom-com like The Best Man that was full of bankable stars like Taye Diggs and Nia Long to comfortably coexist with a small indie horror movie made on a shoestring budget with no tested stars like The Blair Witch Project. A good movie year is a year full of good movies for everyone. During this time, many critics began to delineate between the quote old guard and the new guard of American directors. The old guard of directors like Stanley Kubrick, Steven Spielberg, and Martin Scorsese were of course still making films that received acclaim, but critics began to point to the militant obedience to tradition and a deficiency of original ideas that might have come from this class of directors. A quote from Gordinier says, "If Hollywood's old guard tends to kneel before the 10 Commandments of screenwriting, quote, thou shalt not insert a plot point on page 27, the new guard behaves with blissful sacrilege, even when it comes to the laws of physics. Like, who says you can't make a movie called Being John Malkovich that takes place inside of the mind of John Malkovich, starring John Malkovich as John Malkovich? That's the elevator pitch that Coke dreams are made of. Or that you can't introduce motion capture technology that laid the foundation for techniques that were used in Lord of the Rings and Avatar for a character that people want to kill with a hammer in Jar Jar Binks from Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Ahmed Best, you did your best, and that's what matters. However, it's worth it to note that not every New Guard film used fantastical worlds and groundbreaking visual effects to alter the media landscape, and not every Old Guard filmmaker was being left behind. In a word, healthy competition was the name of the film game in 1999. One group specifically that was experiencing an excellent film year was, you guessed it, the teenager. Films like Dick, She's All That, 10 Things I Hate About You, Cruel Intentions, American Pie, and Election felt very relatable and personal and marked the turn of the teen comedy, moving from aspirational to relatable. The love was idealistic, the dress codes were unrealistic, but overall these films could be enjoyed by any teen. It's not to say that these films were perfect, because some of the humor didn't age super well, but they're still fun. Old Guard or new, film school darling, or blockbuster hit, something was happening in 1999 in Hollywood, and we can see the effects of that even in films today. Films at this time were about throwing caution to the wind, and more importantly, they had the opportunity to do so. These filmmakers had, for the most part, the trust of the studios to helm their productions with a clear vision. 1999 felt like one of the last years where there was a leap of faith on a lot of weird, interesting, personal ideas without need for an algorithm.
You know I didn't even care. You know it, come on, are you ready?
To close out 1998 and enter 1999, MTV's New Year's Eve party featured Limp Bizkit covering Prince's 1982 hit 1999, which is funnily indicative of the sonic melting pot that was the year 1999. We had the rise of bubblegum pop with Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, the Backstreet Boys, and NSYNC, and the ensuing wave of derivatives of them. We did it all for the Nookie with the rise in popularity of new metal bands like Limp Bizkit, Korn, and Slipknot. We were living La Vida Loca with the Latin explosion with artists like Ricky Martin, Mark Anthony, and Jennifer Lopez. Hip-hop had cemented itself as a true tour de force, continuing to establish itself across the country and different regions turning in their own unique take on it, from New York to the West Coast to the Dirty South. It was just a party of a year, and it felt like every genre was firing on all cylinders and was given the opportunity in the spotlight to shine. In 1999, we got the show where all of these songs and artists could converge with TRL, hosted by Carson Daly. And yes, the show technically premiered in 1998, but 1999 was the first full year of the show and arguably its peak. For those who don't know, Total Request Live, or TRL, was a daily music countdown show that highlighted some of the music industry's biggest hits. It served as this meeting ground for all things pop culture, all things pop Americana, and most specifically, all things teen, especially the teen girl. Hundreds and sometimes thousands of screaming, adoring fans would flock to the ninth circle of hell known as New York City's Times Square and to stand at the feet of 1515 Broadway where TRL would film to get a glimpse of their favorite stars. Contrary to the pop romp that TRL could be a lot of the times, the weekly countdowns would often feature selections from multiple genres. Greg Marks for Vulture writes, musical acts of all denomination, with the exception of anything vaguely alt hipster, got love on TRL, especially the aggro antidote to teen pop gush, rap rock, from Limp Bizkit and Korn in particular, often dueled with Jive's Holy Trinity for glory at the top of the countdown. And that was what MTV was truly trying to be at the time, which was this convergence of the hottest genres of music, offering something different from each other and representative of different fan groups. A concept that feels pretty foreign now, as many of us are siloed into our algorithmically determined interests. TRL as a concept is also indicative of just how different our relationship to celebrity is now. The distance between you and your favorite artist was a lot more prominent at this time. So snagging a ticket to be in the live audience for a TRL taping or just going to stand outside was a huge deal because you'd be like, wow, there's no other situation where I'm going to see Britney Spears this close. Or there's no other time where she might acknowledge my existence if she saw me through the window. Whereas now, your favorite artist is really just the touch of a button away via social media. And there's much to discuss in how that's both a blessing and a curse. Our proximity to our favorite celebrities becoming more democratized does seem to dethrone the reverence of celebrity, and it reminds us that they're people just like us. But we've seen with the response to artists like Chappell Roan pushing back against the notion that the limelight automatically equals having no boundaries, that we still haven't quite understood that celebrities are people just like us. Though there was a varied lineup of artists that would appear on TRL and whose music was getting its chance in the spotlight, bubblegum pop was undoubtedly the genre du jour, and one artist became the poster child for the genre seemingly overnight: the legendary Britney Spears. The success of Britney Spears as an entertainer and artist is a formula with which it has multiple parts, one of the biggest parts being her image. Her smash hit Baby One More Time hit the pop scene with a winner in its music video, a video that grew in prominence due to TRL. As Stephen Thomas Erlewine for Billboard writes, quote, Britney's popularity is inextricably tied to the TRL era. Neither would have been as big a sensation without the other. Britney would go on to achieve great success in the new millennium and would be the blueprint for what pop stars are, or what they could be, in the digital age. Britney Spears and the idea of commodified stardom and commodified humanity is a topic too big for this video, but trust me, that will be a video from me in the future. The success of Britney Spears and in turn Christina Aguilera, NSYNC, and the Backstreet Boys felt like the sonic identity of many a teen girl. And historically, people have been so cool about the interest of teen girls. There was a notable disdain for this genre, and you could localize some of that disdain in one of the biggest musical events of that year, Woodstock '99. Woodstock, as it's known culturally, is a musical festival celebrating all things peace, love, and rock and roll. Woodstock as a concept was born out of the social and political unrest that loomed heavy over the country in the late 60s. The music festival would go on to become this iconic symbol of peace, love, and music that became synonymous with 60s counterculture, and served as a huge concourse for young people to come together. It was a rainy weekend in Bethel, New York that featured a lot of naked people, even more experimental substances, a diabolical lack of hygiene, but a celebration of culture nonetheless. For its 25th anniversary, the festival was brought back, this time out of Saugerties, New York. This event pretty much went off without a hitch, though heavy rain caused the ground to become muddy, and mud became a very prominent part of the festivities. The success of the festival set the stage for the festival to come back for a third time in 1999 to commemorate the event's 30th anniversary, but things felt different. Woodstock '99 is the physical manifestation of the answers to two questions. what are all the bad things that can happen at a music festival, and how can they all happen at one time? Woodstock 99 was presented as a Woodstock for Generation X, an opportunity to creatively come together to listen to and celebrate the sound of the time. But the problem is that this generation was not the generation of 1969. Socially, politically, economically, the America of 1969 and 1999 were sisters, not twins, and incredibly different sisters at that. Woodstock 99 was an incredibly insane event that honestly deserves its own video because it was 3 days of pure debauchery that deserves to be expounded upon in detail, but I'm going to give you the top notes here. The lineup for the weekend included the Red Hot Chili Peppers, DMX, Metallica, Limp Bizkit, Korn, Kid Rock, Megadeth, Creed, Rage Against the Machine, the Dave Matthews Band, and truly, I could keep going. While previous editions of the festival had a somewhat mixed crowd, the demographics of Woodstock 99 were largely college-age white men. To call the people in charge of organizing this festival from a logistical level ignorant feels way too kind. Negligence ran rife throughout this event, including a general lack of resources to combat the extreme temperatures, high prices of basic necessities, it was cheaper to get a beer than it was to get a bottle of water, and rampant violent behavior that sat at a roaring boil all weekend. In the grander legacy of the festival, many have pointed to the lineup as being the ones to incite violence, though that feels irresponsible to assign the full blame of the actions that took place that weekend to the acts that were contracted to play there. The behavior that took place was certainly not helped by Fred Durst's rousing speech in the middle of break stuff.
How many people here ever woke up one morning and just decided it wasn't one of those days and you're gonna break some? Well, this is one of them days, y'all, where everything's fucked up. You just wanna break some.
But to assign full blame to the genre of nu metal or rock or rap feels ahistorical to everything that was going on at the time beyond the festival grounds. Not to mention that many of the acts did perform political songs like Megadeth's Peace Sells But Who's Buying and basically all of Rage Against the Machine set. However, it is worth it to note that the festival also only booked 3 female acts to play: Alanis Morissette, Sheryl Crow, and Jewel, who were all booked 1 per day. They got, for lack of a better term, heckled, with Sheryl Crow having human feces thrown at her during her set. Alanis Morissette was booed from impatient Limp Bizkit fans because she went on before them, and Rosie Perez, who was presenting a band, was jeered to show her tits. Yes, this event did not go to plan in the least, and concertgoers were not experiencing what was considered to be a normal festival, but a festival selling water for $5 doesn't make you tell every woman you see to flash her chest or try to grope her. So it begs the question of where was all of this anger and entitlement coming from? What galvanized this massive horde of people to behave in this way? Was the attitude of these rowdy concert goers a rejection of what they felt to be popular culture in the form of bubblegum pop? Or is it an anger directed towards a looming sense of a culture that they feel doesn't cater to them and only them anymore?
Some Woodstock 99ers seemed like aggros without a cause. Yes?
I'm sick of the Backstreet Boys on MTV Live. I'm sick of that. You know, it's bullshit.
Don't hold back on me.
Think that aggro vibe had anything to do with what
Yeah,
happened?
I mean, I definitely think that that's what drew the large male, white male, Abercrombie Fitch population of young, white, male, frustrated, upper middle class. I've been given everything and still I'm mad, but I'm not really sure why I'm mad kind of attitude.
Amanda Petruzik for The New Yorker, in a review of the HBO documentary Woodstock 99, says, quote, "Sometimes bad behavior is a contagion. Enmity and resentment can replicate so quickly. After all the tumult and division the U.S. has experienced the past 5 years, it's perhaps easier to recognize those truths now, though it is still hard to understand them." After a weekend full of violence, countless unreported cases of sexual assault, and vandalism, the festival venue was set ablaze at the hands of candles that were originally intended to be passed out for a vigil in tribute to the Columbine tragedy that had happened 3 months before. April 19th, 1999 was the first Monday back after prom at Columbine High School. The time after prom is always momentous as it marks some of the final weeks of school and means graduation for seniors. However, the next day, April 20th, 1999, 12 students and a teacher would never make it to summer vacation, and some of them would never get a chance to don their cap and gown or turn their tassel. The massacre at Columbine High School marked an abrupt change in U.S. history that 25 years on, we are still experiencing the direct impact of. I highly recommend this video from Ask a Mortician from a couple of years ago that expounds upon a lot of the myths and what we got wrong in understanding about Columbine. But for the sake of this video, I'd like to discuss what Columbine represents as far as a drastic change in culture and history. School shootings hadn't been a new occurrence by Columbine, so it does beg the question of what is it about this specific instance that made such a big wave? To answer that, we must look outside of the event itself and look at how it was covered. The 24-hour news cycle in an effort to satisfy the public's insatiable hunger for answers on how or why something like this happens. For days, news stations reported live from Littleton, Colorado, interviewing grief-stricken parents and students, mining them for answers that they themselves were still searching for. Founder of the Treatment Advocacy Center, E. Fuller Torrey, told the LA Times, quote, "Columbine was the first school shooting to become a giant 24-hour news cycle story, and therefore served as a historical marker for those that followed. It was well documented by videos and writings by the perpetrators, which became available on the internet. Technology was creating a vacuum of information that only begets more questions, and inadvertently created a wave of misinformation. Not to mention that constant coverage took the murderers into infamy overnight, prompting dozens of copycat killings happening in the wake of Columbine in the ensuing years. They were deified and martyred. There was an intense desire for fame and to be known, even for such a heinous act. From the onset, the narrative of who the perpetrators were and why they did what they did became marred by a freshly traumatized survivor pool. One of the first inconsistencies being what social group the perpetrators belonged to. The initial narrative was that they were social outcasts who belonged to a group called the Trenchcoat Mafia, a group known for being odd outsiders who were always plotting something. When the reality of the situation was that the Trenchcoat Mafia was a collection of D&D nerds and gamers who said on multiple accounts that the two killers weren't really a part of their group. The next myth was that the culprits were prompted to do this because they played violent video games like Doom and listened to Marilyn Manson, which led many conservative pundits and parent groups to decry that this particular type of music and video games were the reason for the youth becoming seduced into violence and sin. Because the killers were dead at the end of their rampage, the public wasn't able to get direct answers as to why they did what they did. So they redirected their ire and confusion to anything that they could get their hands on, even if it wasn't true. A lot of what we got wrong about Columbine seemed to say that the shiny veneer of an incredibly abundant glut of entertainment was the only plausible answer to this tragedy. However, similar to Woodstock 99, music in video games wasn't inciting a violent rage that wasn't already there. And that rage was proving to be a highly contagious epidemic. When you zoom out, a far more impactful influence perhaps of the perpetrators of Columbine were the events of the Oklahoma City bombing just a few years before. One of the killers even wrote about Timothy McVeigh and was influenced by what he did, wanting to cause even more destruction in his own way. The legacy of Columbine could be seen as an act of two troubled teens wanting to create a wave of destruction. But in actuality, it was a part of the complex web of white supremacy and the alt-right that has festered in online and in-person spaces, the likes of which we are still seeing today. The wake of copycat killings that followed Columbine and the culture war on music and video games has left us with questions of what did we really learn from Columbine? In 25 years, what do we have to show that we don't want something like it to happen again? What have we done to prevent future children from being placed in the painfully American fatal fraternity that is school shooting victims? Just as much as the new millennium could mark a sense of continued prosperity, there was a hotbed of anxiety and rage that would soon bubble over, and Columbine is the first gut punch of reality. We let the good times roll in the 90s, but this tragedy, along with countless others in the decades, revealed that we might have been rolling over a culture of violence and fear into the new millennium.
It's 2 a.m., January 1st, year 2000. Power's out. It's pitch black. You need light. If you planned ahead, you'll have one of these. Just wind it up. You'll have light and communication. Call now and get the ultimate Y2K survival kit from BeCalm.com.
In 1999, we were sure that we were flying, but Columbine and the ensuing panic of Y2K revealed that we were falling, even if we didn't know it yet. The University of Minnesota describes the Y2K problem as the result of a problem, quote, caused by a shortcut taken by early computer programmers. To conserve memory space, early programmers recorded the year using the last 2 digits rather than 4. Computers using this system would then recognize the year 2000 as the year 1900 instead, potentially causing serious problems in many different sectors of business and government. With the looming threat of Y2K, there was a belief that planes would somehow fall out of the sky or that ATM machines would malfunction and no one would have money when the clock struck 12 on January 1st, 2000. In fact, a non-zero number of people became doomsday preppers, seemingly preparing hordes of food and resources for war or the purge or whatever was going to happen at 12:01 January 1st. I had just turned 1 year old, so I decided to ask my mom what she was doing to prepare for Y2K and what was going on at the time. She revealed to me that she started prepping for the impending Y2K doom on December 30th, 1999, wherein she went to the grocery store only to find that Pop-Tarts and Vienna sausages were left. So if Y2K did happen, my family was going to survive on Pop-Tarts, but they were the frosted strawberry Pop-Tarts, so we wouldn't have suffered. Though some decided to exercise their panic via building bunkers and buying thousands of dollars worth of powdered food and guns, there was a societal panic that hung heavy over everything during this year. With everything that I've talked about, there was a sense of not knowing what was to be of this new century. How would time change us? How would we change time? What would become of technology? Would our lust for progress eclipse the necessity of it? Would the new millennium satiate us? 1999 feels both like a foregone year and also like it happened just yesterday. It was a banner year that gave us a lot of what we love about modern pop culture, and we still are feeling the impacts of it, positive or negative, to this day. And who knew that the best description of this year would be contained in a song released 17 years before it even happened?